We do actually use math in this game.
Turns
out to program, you need to use math.
When you look at accessibility as a whole in the games industry, it wasn't even mildly thought about outside of potentially colorblind mode 10 years ago. And if they were in games, it was largely by accident. And then you kind of started seeing games take it more seriously and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we can do some things that broaden our demographic.
My name is Brock Davis and I'm a test analyst for Diablo 4. A lot of changes have been happening since we last spoke over a year ago.
So over the last year, we've done a lot of updates to the accessibility in the game.
We have 20 different visual accessibility features. Physical accessibility is next with 6 features. To help the physically disabled and visual blind players, we have the auto pin feature that pins new quests so that you don't have to pin them manually.
With navigation assistance, Brock led the full initiative. He was responsible for all the test planning and execution, working together with designers and engineers.
Something that became very clear once you actually have to make something like this, you have to build it up in layers, right?
Yeah.
Like you need pathing data. The next step of that is auto pinning where you need to go on the map. And then on that, you build on top of it. Here's all the feedback systems, right? And that's where our compass and sonar stuff come in.
I created the navigational compass feature. We want the feature itself to be accessible, but also very subtle so that players can still enjoy the scenery and the environment of Diablo 4.
Arthur was a great resource for us to have. He's super passionate, and we really spitballed on how to build this system in a way that would really influence how the player interacts with the game.
It helps you spend less time looking at the map and being actually focused on what you're doing, what's going on around you.
How the compass works is that we have our 3D road points that we take, and we project those points onto the 2D plane. So, long story short, math.
We started thinking of what are the environments the player can end up with? How will it behave in the darkest dungeons or in the brightest sense of Kyrgyzstan? What will happen when you have a certain buff with VFX on you? And we also spent some time playing in Torment 4, running through Helltide, when all the monsters just rushing at you, just making sure that you can actually see that compass, that it's helpful and that it is actually doing what it's supposed to do.
You're doing your own iteration as a programmer, and then you present it to the design. QA also has their iteration, right? It's a long process. I would shout out QA, honestly.
Brock and Andrey.
Yeah, they're like the real champions, in my opinion.
To me, being a test analyst is about making sure that things not only work, but feel right. It's not just logging bugs or finding crashes. It's asking, does it make sense? Is it fun? And we, as test analysts, we try to get involved early, quite often when the feature does not exist.
I had Andrey integrated directly into my team, so we do bug triage twice a week. We knew that it was critical to land an embedded screen reader because that was going to be the first gateway for a lot of players to be able to come in and experience the content.
I did it!
Use screen reader. Enabled. Screen reader speed.
You don't realize how many places it needs to be used. If you use our screen reader, you'll notice that it's quite responsive. If you are quickly toggling through actionables, you want to know what they are. You don't want to be waiting half a second. And so that sort of drove us away from using an online service where there would be a latency in retrieving that text. And I think that's really key with the combat. You don't want to be waiting half a second to find out that you've just targeted Lilith.
Echo of Lilith.
Any accessibility feature involves close collaboration between design and engineering. When a feature becomes available in-game, it goes through several rounds of rigorous testing, and even after the feature launches, our job does not stop.
In QA, we always have to work within the team, talking to a developer on a new concept so that we can start early enough to test plan for that concept. Communication is key.
Brock is one of the test analysts that I've been working a lot with, and to be honest, it's been a game changer to have someone as passionate about accessibility as he is. Screen Reader specifically heavily relies on the UX pipeline. Once we have those designs available, we first of all need to think of a functional side of it. Does it read all the correct elements on the screen? Can you skip between lines? Does it respect this custom speed that you selected in the settings?
95% of the time, the screen reader just works and we don't have to think about it. And that 5% when we build a screen, now we can go through and manually set a read order that can effectively build a better mental map for players.
The Armory, it was a completely new UI, and that required lots of custom screen reader work.
Hammer time. Equipment.
Huge revamp of wardrobe.
Warriors top knot.
That was a big effort. Vessel of Hatred. We've had so many screens. Mercenaries, that was a super fun one.
The complexity in getting this as, a feature complete and being consistent across all platforms was, a mammoth effort.
Our goal was to make sure that people of every capability can come into the game and play and have a great experience. And now we enabled players who couldn't see to actually navigate the entire campaign and do it only with audio cues, which was a really, really big win that we were aiming for a while.
Audio navigation assistance is where the player places a pen, and a directional sound will play to help the player to the pen.
Okay, that's cool.
The sonar navigation feature, what we wanted to provide players was a way for folks who are playing with low vision to be able to get a pretty clear signal as to what objectives they want to navigate to next. It'll play different sounds based upon your character's relative heading to where the sound is going to be. We call it sonar because it's literally like little pings that's playing that kind of guides you along the path to where you need to go.
So the first thought was, all right, well, we're going to add an ability for the players to auto-pin their destination to their primary quest, and that'll be their primary pull through the world. And then we're like, all right, well, how are we going to identify the right directions? And we sat down with our audio team, and Christian was an amazing help here, where we're like, you know what? So we're going to provide multiple cones of importance to the player.
Sonar tries to take a 2D grid visualization of the map that the player is working on or playing within, and we try to guide the player towards audio that lines up with your navigation visuals. And Sonar tries to be a little bit three-dimensional and tell you in what direction you need to head with audio as well as a visual prompt.
If you are dead on, we know that the point we are trying to aim you toward is within this cone. We're going to play this sound. The next thing we check is the next band of like, okay, going in sort of the right direction sound, and then if you fall behind, is the projection from your heading toward where the line is negative, which means it's behind you. In that case, we know we got to play the sad sound, the womp womp.
And Christian, played with a bunch of different sounds to really find ones that kind of met that demand.
It couldn't be just high frequency pings. It had to be something that was a little bit more refined and that wasn't as obnoxious.
We ended up with 3 tones that I think really expertly express the "you're doing a good job" sound effect.
So yeah, this is my sound design session for the Sonar, and I started by looking at what does a Sonar ping sound like in the real world. All of them are pretty annoying. So I knew that I needed to use a derivative of this. So the next thing I did, I started to listen to gems. They're a lot more interesting and a lot less fatiguing than the Sonar pings themselves. So I went and used a synthesizer to generate different sweeping layers. Things like this. Having a quick pitch that dives is an easy way to make sure that people who only hear in certain frequency domains will always get some of that frequency through. We also want something that hits, that makes an impact. We blend them together and we end up with something that's a little bit Sonar and something that's a little bit more complex and a little less fatiguing. So when we are off target, they are facing the wrong direction. They need to be facing a better direction. This is the sound that will play.
Like you hear it and you're like, well, clearly I'm not doing this right.
And when we get closer, the distance between those beats gets a little closer, and we add an element of a wood block to let you know that you're doing something correctly here.
Yeah, you're still kind of going in the right direction, but maybe you're skewing it a little bit too far.
And when we finally turn in within 30 degrees of our visual navigation, we'll hear an on-target sound.
Like, yeah, you're doing a good job. You're going the right way.
One of the problems that we had to deal with is if your character has just crazy run speed buffs going on. Where can we predict you're going to be in like a second and a half based upon how fast you're running right now? As you get closer, we have distance attenuation set up on it, so you'll hear the kind of continuous tone of the traversal approaching and the Sonar pinging in that direction, at which point then the screen reader kicks in to be like, here's a traversal, press this button to navigate.
spacebar.
Having these multiple things in combination is where I really see the whole picture coming together for audio assistance.
Reality is most people turn that feature on. Once it's on permanently. And Brock basically said, can we dial this back a little bit? This is a little too intense and can be a little bit too much over time. And I'm grateful for that because we found the right balance.
We always say that accessibility is a marathon, not a sprint.
Drew was really helpful in providing goalposts for us to make sure that what we delivered on was something that actually moves the needle for accessibility. We were put in front of the right focus groups, and he made sure that when we test, we're testing with our target demographics in mind.
Players who don't need to use the accessibility features, that's great, but accessibility features are important to me because they allow everyone to play the game without question of their mobility, dexterity, or cognitive ability.
You're making room at the table for someone else to come play.
Yeah, exactly.
We're game developers. We want people to play the games. We want more people to play the games that we put out.
Reading all the forum posts about people being able to enjoy the game or seeing a fully blind person defeat Uber Lilith after a launch, those moments hit hard.
As a gamer with no vision whatsoever, I think that when you take into consideration implicit accessibility and the explicit accessibility, that really bridges that gap when it comes to player agency and competitive equity. You really are changing lives.
These features will help people experience things that they otherwise couldn't, and that overall is just an incredible feeling that we all get.
I'd like to say hi to all the folks in the Sightless Slayers Discord. Thank you for adding me whenever you guys have problems. It's the first thing I do in the morning to check to see if I have any ats, and then I get right on adding it to our backlog. Thanks, guys.